Good afternoon from Frankfurt. We are coming live from the Innovate for Climate event. And welcome to the Christopher and Vikram show. It's actually with me here I'm Vikram Widge, the Global Head for Climate Finance and Policy. And I'm here with my friend and colleague and partner in crime in the green bond markets, Christopher Flensborg, who's the head of climate and sustainable finance at SEB Bank, based out of Stockholm. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you very much, Vikram. It's going to be interesting.
Well, it seems that's as much fun as we're going to have, because we're going to be talking about the extremely challenging topic about climate. Having said that, green bonds is emerging as one of the most popular financial products to help solve this problem. You were named the Green Bond Personality of the Year last year. You have a nickname, which I don't know how much you enjoy, Father of the Green Bonds. You helped IFC issue its first green bond in 2010, and we were one of the early movers in this. So what is your take on this? Where has the market come in the last decade, and where do you think it's going to go in the next decade?
So it's a pleasure. Every single day is a pleasure. So 10 years ago when we started and we invited people to join us, we'll have maybe 3, 4, 5 people coming in, and we really engaged and loved our discussion, really believed in the green bond. Today we just had a session where we had 100 people. We have sessions where we have 500 and 600 people. So the green bond is all about mobilizing people. The green bond is basically a tool which is enabling people to work inside their existing organizations, inside their existing mandates, to engage in climate. And due to that, we are now seeing more or less every single bank across the world and most departments working with green bonds.
Yeah, so that's interesting you say that, because when you and I first spoke, and this was a couple of years after, it must have been 2012, and I challenged you on saying that this market will really come into itself if there is going to be some sort of a price advantage to green. We haven't really seen that yet.
That's wrong. You are so wrong there. Of course there's a price advantage. There's a price advantage for everyone. Basically, when we work with green bonds, we're talking about 3 stakeholders. We're talking about the society, we're talking about people that need money, and we're talking about people that's investing money. And then, of course, the bankers in between. And we all gain from it. So the society is gaining because suddenly you have thousands of bankers, if not millions of bankers, engaging their financial brains in how to create a better society. That's mobilizing human capital. At the end of the day, what do you get for money? You get natural resources, you get human resources. And here you get human resources for free. That's an add-on. Secondary, when you talk about investors getting massive benefits. Right now, we're having a universe where you have regulation changing, you have politicians saying this is wrong, you have banning diesel cars in cities, you're having consumer trends with shared economies, sharing cars and sharing everything else, meaning that industries need to change the way they're working. You have pollution. I had numbers of 11% of GDP in some large countries is being used for the health system just to deal with pollution from air and water. So you have pollution, which is driving ways that regulators are forcing people to go out of polluting industries into clean industries, meaning that there's a lot of noise where we all know that this is going to be an essential part of the way that we do finance in 5 and 10 years. So if you're sitting as an investor, how do you get your head around these challenges today? How do you understand all this noise and structure it in a way that you understand when it's going to be relevant for what you're investing? The only way to do that is engaging, and the green bond is allowing you to engage. That's the value.
I liked what you said about it being the basis to develop a new kind of human capital. But millions of bankers, that's scary, man. I mean,
too many, right?
So many? Oh boy. Okay, so we got a job cut out for us there, right? Oh, fine. But before we switch topics, and you and I both have been accused of not staying on topic, right? ADD is been thrown around, so we won't get into air pollution yet, but if we have time, we'll come back to that. I think that's a very interesting and important topic, but staying with green bonds for now. You're developing this human capital, banks are engaging, investors are engaging. Last year, 160 billion plus of green bonds got issued, but that's a fraction, a tiny percentage of the $1 trillion bond market. On the other hand, we have a lot of hope for it. So where are the opportunities, and especially in emerging markets, because that is really where the growth action is going to be?
So I will give you a metaphor. So I'm an old guy, right? I'm almost 50. And when I was a young boy, like 15, 16, 17, I would speak to my grandfather, and my grandfather would say, I remember when I saw the first cars, I was jumping on them so I could drive with them. They were just going into the city, and we had like 2 a week. And today we have cars all over. Now, if you look at green bonds, actually, if you look at green, if you could go into your bank tomorrow and put in savings, let's say you would put in $50 for a saving, and the bank would suddenly offer you 2 choices rather than 1. Today you give the money to the bank, they take them, they lend them out. You don't know for what. If you could tomorrow go into a bank and the bank would ask you, do you want to put into a normal account or do you want to put into a green account? Everything else will be the same. Same return, you can still take out your money. But over here on the green account, we would only invest in projects that is creating clean air and clean water. Where do you put your money? I think everybody would say it's the green account. So if you're having 2 comparable products, the one being much more appealing due to that is green and the other one not, basically just putting in a filter, it's going to drive changes. This is what we're seeing. So what we're having now, that is a green account, which is much more appealing, which have grown from 0 to $400 billion in less than 10 years, where every banks are active. In 10 years, we're not going to talk about anything else. You're going to pay a penalty for not doing green.
I like that, penalty for not doing green. You know, this audience, I suspect, and we'd love to hear from them, is much younger than us. And you think you're old? Some of the people who are running pension plans are seriously old. So what we hear from the millennials and the others who are joining the job market, this is their future. They're the ones who need to invest today for their retirement in 30 years. Do you feel that today's governance of the pension funds, the responsibility, is aligned with what this new generation wants to see in 30 years?
The people at the pension funds are fully aligned. So many of our clients are pension funds, and they are driving this even harder than we are. So basically, the pension funds, the real money, the asset owners, are the ones that have been giving us the power to help driving this change. So we're part of it. They're much larger part. So there's a real in-depth engagement. At the same time, one have to keep in mind that the pension funds and the insurance companies are having what we call a fiduciary duty. They're having a financial mandate to make sure that they have the highest possible return. And that means that to make sure that they understand why they're doing these things, they need to create a prudent analysis on where to go and how to go. And that might delay things sometimes. So I think that where people sometimes are saying that this goes too slow, it might be a reflection of that those people that need to create that implementation actually need to understand the challenges first to be able to make a solid implementation.
So is the evidence there that green can at least perform as well as the non-green?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's a couple of trends which are kind of evident. So if you just look on the production cost, you would have production cost of technologies like solar and wind, which are going massively down. And you have production cost of polluting industries, which are actually going up. That might be because of lack of subsidies, incorporation of subsidies, but it might also be because of consumer trends and better infrastructures. So you're having a number of trends which are talking for a transition to a more efficient society. But at the same time, don't forget that we have a growing population. We have more than 7 billion people at the Earth. We're going to 10 billion. People will consume more because they are going to be in an integrated society. They're going to move to cities. That means that we are forced to work in more efficient ways. We are forced to think new, to make sure that everybody can actually have access to a good living standard.
So, a long time ago, a lot of pension funds, a lot of investors moved away from what were called sin stocks. They performed very well in the market, alcohol, tobacco, ammunition, but we all moved away from it, right? I mean, IFC's charter prohibits us from all this and more, including nuclear and speculative real estate. What role do you think do fiduciaries have in finding that balance with the new bad in terms of it not being green enough?
I think you're coming into a quite interesting area here, because you're talking about sin stocks, and I'm not sure you can talk about sin stocks in this context. So
I was just making a comparison that we had at one time made a decision to give up on return in exchange for doing good.
I get that, and that's a beautiful thought, which I think works very often, but only when you have identified the long-term financial benefits of doing that adjustment. But I think that one thing which I actually fear when we're talking about the transition we're in right now, that is that we get a split transition. So in my world, an inclusive transition is going to be much more forceful. So over the last century, a little more than a century, we've been building modern societies. And that have been built with fossil, that have been built with existing industries, which have done a lot of good work. They've been building health systems, they've been building infrastructures, which are benefiting all of us. That infrastructure is both established and is employing millions and millions and millions of very, very capable engineers, which we need to get a solid transition. So one thing which I really encourage, and which I'm having ongoing discussion about, that is that we should really make sure that we embrace the future and we embrace various sectors. There's a lot of contribution. There's nobody that wants pollution.
So I have one final question for you there, but before that, since we are nearly out of time, I just want to check if there are any questions from the audience. No, none yet. Okay, so then for the final question for you then, Chris, if you had to give advice to our audience here, and just let's assume they are much younger than us, and if they are in their 20s, 30s, what is your advice to them in terms of what can they do with their money, what should they do to influence how their money is used, and where should they be sort of going to do this? So what's your take on that?
I think that the most important, which is often forgotten, which people often forget, that is the power of purchasing. So when you're a consumer, when you're ordering, you have a lot of power because people want to sell you products. Whatever you are, corporate or you're a bank or you are an individual, people are trying to sell you products, right? And in case you're putting up criteria for how to actually select those you do business with, not only the product itself, but also who you deal with, is going to force people to change mentality. So I think that whatever you're sitting in municipalities, whatever you're sitting in the public sector or in the private sector, whatever you act as an individual or as an employee, think about who you deal with. That's point one, because that's going to drive supply chain change or supply chains, and that will create changes. Then secondary, questions, simple questions, because questions have the tendency of raising further questions. That means you're activating a positive circle rather than a negative circle. So if people don't supply you with sufficient information to actually understand what your money is doing, just raise the question. What are you doing with my money?
So ask questions.
Yes.
Always good advice. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank
As
you, Vikram.
always, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.